Hey everyone, and welcome to the Cheyenne Hills Podcast, Verse by Verse. We know it's often hard to find time to spend studying God's Word, so we're happy you can join us as we read, unpack, and discuss Scripture every Tuesday and Thursday. We hope you enjoy the program.
Hello again, everybody, and welcome to the podcast. I'm glad you've joined us. We are in Genesis chapter 47. Lots of drama, lots of action, and we kind of stopped short of finishing the whole story here, guys. Basically, they were given the land of Goshen. It's also called Ramses. We're not sure if we can fully understand what's trying to be described there, but I think it's just kind of two names for the same area. And Pharaoh says, "Fine, you guys take that land," and they were able to move them. So this is kind of picking up there at verse 27. So we're at chapter 47, verse 27. If you happen to be following along in your own Bibles with this study. Thus Israel settled in the land of Egypt, in the land of Goshen, and they gained possession of it, and they were fruitful and multiplied greatly. Well, this is a theme too. You know, one of the things we see, this is how the Jewish people, or the Israelites, right? Jacob was changed his name to Israel. These are Israelites. They're his kids. They started out with these sons of his, and they all were down there, and they were fruitful. They multiplied greatly. Fruitful, I think. I think they were good shepherds. They became their herds and flocks grew greatly, and I think that's probably part of that. And probably they did some farming as well, I would imagine, because they had their livestock, their equity in their place grew and multiplied greatly, according to this. And then we know that it multiplied to a million men when they exited 400 years later, right?
Yeah, something like that. Yeah.
So this tribe was going to grow to be very large by the time Moses comes along several years later. And Jacob lived in that land of Egypt for 17 years. So the days of Jacob, the years of his life, were 147 years. And when the time drew near for Israel, that Israel must die. Now he's saying Israel, but this is Jacob. It's the same guy. And it came time that Israel must die. He called his son Joseph, and he said to him, "If now I have found favor in your sight, put your hand here under my thigh and promise to deal kindly and truly with me. Do not bury me in Egypt." So he wanted to be back in
He wanted to go back
homeland.
to dad's.
Wanted to be back in his homeland. Yeah. The land of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. That's where he wanted to die, or be buried.
Well, and Rachel here. Soon he'll talk about her.
Okay.
Hit the wife, the pretty wife.
They took her back there as well. Is that what you're saying?
Well, she died on the
buried
way.
halfway to.
That's right. Okay, that she died on the way. So that's the land he wanted to be, probably maybe even close. That's good. Good reminder.
Henrietta.
Yeah, you're right. "Do not bury me in Egypt, but let me lie with my fathers. Carry me out of the land of Egypt and bury me in their burying place. He answered, I will do so as you have said. And he said, swear to me. And he swore to him. Then Israel bowed himself upon the head of his bed. And so I don't think he dies yet, because there's some blessing that happens.
Well, I was going to say, this is a common theme of at least Genesis, is that we get the short version of the story. So like he's about to die. He wants this all done. And then we get the detailed version right after
That's a good point. That's what happens.
It's like Genesis 1, and then Genesis 2 is the further explanation of it.
Right. So we get the whole creation picture, and then go back and get the zoom in picture. So I think you're right. That's probably exactly what's happening here. Any thoughts? I mean, there's some metaphors we've been kicking around here of what's this? What do you think? Some symbolic things that's happening of the struggle, if you will, of Joseph and really Jacob's life.
Well, I had been talking last time about something that, and we mentioned it when we had our rookie episode. If you guys missed that, go back and watch that, because that was interesting. Me and Evan and Austin trying to do this.
The rookie group.
Yeah, Evan.
That's awesome. Well, thanks for carrying the torch, guys. Good job.
However well we did. But we talked about how there's a lot of parallels between Joseph's story and Jesus' story, and it seems kind of part of what it's doing is setting up a prototype for the Hebrew mind of how Jesus ended up working, because of sin, Joseph was sent often went through tribulations and stuff like that, but it was all part of God's plan so that he could go ahead and make a home for the people he promised to save.
Yeah.
So that when it came to famine, if the brothers hadn't done what they did, Jacob's household, Israel's household, would have probably perished, and that was not what God promised. And so, and then even unto, there's probably some of this is stretching, but like when during the famine, when he convinced all the people of Egypt to give them his crops, and then to give them his land, and then to give him everything else, until eventually they were just declared themselves servants of him.
Right.
And then Jesus said, you guys are thirsty, and I have living water that you need. Right. And so bit by bit, the idea that I was seeing is maybe that we bit by bit will finally, because we're thirsty enough, give everything we have and become servants to get that living water that we can't survive without.
Kind of like the woman at the well of that picture of like, well, I have to come back here all the time for this. Well, let me give you water
that you'll never have to draw again. No, I think it's an interesting setting up a metaphor here that it's kind of built into the DNA that they could always go back to. And I think it works. I think it's an interesting observation. I'm not sure I've heard anybody say, especially the part where they're selling off their crops, and they gave them all the money, then they gave them their crops, then they gave them the livestock, and then they gave them the land, then they gave themselves. But I never
First
thought
you get the money, then you get the oh wait, that's it. But so I don't know if that fits all the way.
No, but it's an interesting thought that because we I think we do that in our sanctification. I mean, there's I've given different portions of my life at different times of my life to God. It's like I gave you all of my life when I accepted Christ. But that's the justification part. But the sanctification part, it's a process. And there's some things that God comes knocking on my door and said, yeah, are you going to let me into that closet? Because there's some stuff in there. It's like, no, stay away from that one, Lord. And finally I say, you know what? I need to give that to him too. So I think it works. I think it's an interesting observation.
Well, I think in bringing that full circle, that idea in 27, thus Israel settled in the land of Egypt, in the land of Goshen, and they gained possessions in it and were fruitful and multiplied greatly. We know that's a blessing from God.
Yeah.
And so seeing all, and carrying on that metaphor from what Kasey was talking about, this idea of this has all been won for you, not by your own hand.
Yeah.
But Joseph acquired all of this. You had nothing to do with it. No. Jesus doing the same thing with redemption on the cross, but then moving that towards, now that we've accepted that, now that we are under, whether it be Joseph or whether we put that into Jesus, now he can bless us immeasurably. Yeah. Now we can multiply and be fruitful because we are now not, as he said, we've given everything to him. So now that we can be his servants in the kingdom.
Yeah. 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 When I was in seminary, I remember one of the profs said that probably the most efficient way to do government is, because we were talking about capitalism and socialism and all these things, and probably the most efficient way is a communist way of doing this if you had a benevolent dictator, right? Yep. And of course, we know because of human nature that's
absolute power corrupts absolutely.
Absolutely. So that's why another option has to be found, because there's nobody that can handle that kind, but Christ can. And so maybe this is even a picture of what I would say maybe our eternity is going to be, because Christ is going to own it all. We will have jobs in the kingdom. We'll have fulfillment. We'll have joy. But I don't think we're going to sit around on clouds.
It'll be perfect work.
Yeah. We're not going to sit around on clouds and strum harps.
James might.
Well, James, of course he will. But I think we'll be part of this whole and love the work that we've been given, I think.
Yeah.
And in the freedom, because he is in charge of everything and he is a benevolent leader. And so I think it's an interesting picture. And so we get a little bit of a picture of that here. That I think, Kasey, you have a really good observation. Well, bit by bit, we kind of give our lives over ultimately to God.
till we're ultimately sanctified. Yeah, and I think if we go on, we're seeing these themes of Genesis getting wrapped up here.
Go ahead. Read on there.
Well, as I say, like right here, it's in 29, and it says, "If now I have found favor in your sight, put your hand under my thigh and promise to deal kindly and truly with me. Do not bury me in Egypt." So what else did, Abraham did the same thing for his son. Like he had his servant come and put this, like, so we're seeing all of these kind of themes of make promises, fulfill them, do not deal unkindly with me, over and over and over again.
Right.
We are trusting these other people to be obedient.
Yeah.
In the right way.
This is random, but it's interesting to me how passionate he was to be buried in his Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob in his own land. And I've often thought myself, I've lived a lot of different places. And I've lived in Scott County for 25 years, basically. And then I've lived really outside of Scott County more than 25 years, and lived in different places. Like, if I were to die, I don't have a wish, but he knew exactly. Yeah. You take me back to bury me here. This is who I am. Well, and I just thought, that's kind of an interesting, I don't know why I thought of that. I hope I don't die today, but I've not made any kind of plans.
Well, Ken, I think you'd be able to enlighten us, but I think it's only Joseph and Jacob that our bones are carried out. That is quoted in the scriptures. Like I'm pretty sure, I'm not 100% sure, but the only ones that like we carried Joseph's bones out of Egypt and we carried Jacob's. It doesn't say we carried anybody else's. Like, and we know that the other 12 die in the 400 years, the other brothers, but it doesn't say. Hey, we brought Judah's bones back.
Yeah, that's
no,
true.
it's just these two that at least in the scriptures that I can think of
that highlighted
for whatever reason that they were like, nope, I'm not here, because that would be a big pile of bones to carry.
Maybe being buried in Canaan is like being buried in,
your family cemetery.
Well, no, I was thinking about a higher level, like the what's the cemetery in Washington D.C.
Arlington.
Thank you. Couldn't come up with that word. So it's like Arlington. Maybe it's just such a special, and only the special soldiers get to be buried there. Maybe Jacob and Joseph would certainly qualify as the special soldiers, if you will. I don't know. But this was my one shot at that. So,
well, there's something too. Those are the people who were like explicitly told that they'd be taken to this land and cared for in this land, like Isaac or Isaac and Abraham were kind of told, this is where you're going to sojourn, and I'm going to make your people great.
So it's God's promise to them.
God promised. He said, "We'll take you down to Egypt, but don't worry. I promised you I'll fulfill my promises," which is what he said. I think when he sent him back, says you need to leave this land where he was raising the sheep with his father-in-law, cheating him and stuff like that, and you need to go back. Yeah. And so God kind of these are the people that God specifically said go here. Yeah. And so it's kind of them returning to fulfill that.
Going back to 46:4, it says, "I myself will go down with you." Speaking, God is speaking to Jacob as his whole family is going down to Egypt. "I myself will go down with you to Egypt, and I will also bring you up again. And Joseph's hand shall close your eyes." Now, I think
that's interesting.
It's the both and. Like, there's all these already but not yet in Scripture, or the prophecies that absolutely pertain to a moment in time, but also are Christological. But this idea of Jacob, I'm literally going to take you down there. Your bones are going to come back with this promise, but also the larger idea of Israel is also in that idea is going to go down there, and I'm going to come back with them.
We're going to bring those bones back, and we see those dead bones, in Ezekiel rising, coming back to life again. So there's those bones have a lot of metaphors. If you keep chasing that one down too, as far as the Jewish people, it's like it's just a people group that
won't die.
Exactly right. That's exactly right. And
that should be our next podcast is rabbit trails.
This is a group of people that they won't die because they've got God's promise on them. That's a whole nother story. But well, thank you guys, and great job. And Kasey, again, thanks for joining us and for
love the metaphor.
Yeah, loving the metaphor. That's good stuff. Thank you guys so much for joining us here in our journey through Genesis. God bless you all.